The image that is currently on your screen here is the eFORMz composer. As you can see, it consists of multiple window panes. We're going to need to open our sample packing slip project in the eFORMz composer to get started, and to do that we can navigate to the main menu and select File, Open Project, and in the default installation of eFORMz there is a file called Projects created under Minisoft eFORMz 6. So opening up the Projects folder, I decided to create a new folder with all of my files for our two-sided thermal label printing demo here, and that folder is 2ST samples. You can do it whichever way you'd like to put your files anywhere under this Projects folder. If we open that, you can see our projects here, and we want to open the sample packing slip project. And once open, it will display in the eFORMz composer. So let's go over just a brief overview of what is going on here with all of these panes. In the top left, we have what is called the project window, and we see it says project followed by the project name. And the project window consists of the forms, variables, and other customized changes that are going to be implemented to the project. And just below that, we have the variables window. And the variables window is a great window for a couple of reasons, especially for seeing all of the variables that you have created and what they all contain. So all the data that your variables are picking up. And of course, speaking of data, to the right we have the viewer. And the viewer has two panes, and the top pane contains our incoming data, or the output file from your application software, and eFORMz uses that output as input. The bottom pane displays your form template and data together, and this is a merged preview. And again, the raw data merged with your form. In this example, we're not using a form template, we're using the document template to build a form natively within eFORMz, and we're going to go into that in just a moment. So, there's a brief overview of what all the panes are. Now, with that said, how do we get the data from this pane to the bottom pane looking the way it does? Well, first, you heard me mention variables earlier, and if we go over to our project window, we see that we have a list of these variables created already. And before we get to how do you create them, what exactly is a variable? More or less, variables store data for later use, and there's a lot of advantages to this, especially since you can modify the data in a variable in any number of ways. And you can, of course, place them onto a form and move them around through document template components and elements, which we'll get to in a moment. Any one variable can be used multiple times within a particular project. So to create a variable, we can go up here to the top pane of our viewer, where we see our incoming data, and simply right-click and select Add Variable. Now, there are several ways to add variables, and the method of adding a variable will change depending upon your input. XML uses a node feature, so it's very easy to add variables really with any kind of input, but especially so with XML. ZPL uses a different style, and we'll look at that in the next video, but more or less you left-click and drag the particular string of characters to add the variable. So with our variable dialog box open, we can just simply select OK, and we have ourselves a new variable. And notice in our project window here that we see the shipment number variable, and if we scroll down here to our variables window, we see our shipment number variable and the data that it contains. So that's basically how you add a variable, but what good is a variable if you can't place it on your form? It's no good. So how do we do that? How do we create this form? Or in this instance, our packing slip portion of our two-sided label. Well, in this example, we use something called the document template. There are two methods for creating forms and labels in eFORMz. One of them is the document template, and we'll look at the other method in our next video because we use both methods for various reasons. And that method, of course, is called rule-based, and that's a drag-and-drop, very easy-to-use feature, but it has some limitations. The document template is more powerful, and its two biggest advantages are repeatability and pagination. So it can create forms that move with your incoming data. And this is very important if you're creating something like a packing slip, because you want these detail items to be able to repeat in a paginated fashion, and you can limit the number of items that appear on a label and so on and so forth. So it's more powerful, but it is a little more intricate and has more of a learning curve than the rule-based method. But again, we'll go into the rule-based method in the next video. Both methods enhance the function and appearance of output. And with the document template in particular, there are a lot of things you can do, but they all will require document components, and these are descriptors that define particular layout properties. And paragraphs, tables, boxes are some document components. And then, of course, document elements, and this is where the real powerful advantages are, in that you can use barcodes, images, and as well as variables we've created already, and you can use constant text and various other elements to create powerful forms. So, with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at our document template over here. And we've used descriptions in this video, particularly for this project, so that it'll be easier to find things that you're looking for if you wanted to change this project as you're following along. And we can collapse and expand our document components rather easily. We just select that, and we've expanded our table. And as we can see here, we have our descriptions, row, header. So this row represents our header. And we created a table, and to do that you can simply right-click and add the document template, add document component, table, very simple. And once you see the table, you can right-click it, add row, add paragraph. So it's very, very intuitive in that sense. And when you see this row here, this represents our header. It has a cell and another table, and it has a couple of rows. We can expand these out here. So first, we have our top heading, and this has a couple of cells. And if we look, we can see that one of these paragraphs has the content packing slip. Okay, this is just a static text element packing slip. And as we can see, that's right here on our form. So that is where that is. And we can see also that next to it we have a carton and we have a weight value. And this, of course, uses a constant text element which says carton. Very simple. And then it has the variable weight, which we selected from one of the variables we created earlier. So to do this, you would simply, to a cell, you can right-click the cell and select Add Document Component Paragraph. And then to the paragraph, you select, let's create the text value first, add text, text value, and simply enter the text value, and we'll just say sample. And there it is. So it immediately appears on the form, just like so. And of course, you can edit the font and change it in any way you would like. And of course, color, although if you are using a two-sided thermal label printer, color is irrelevant. And of course, you can change that. And let's go ahead and remove that. It's real simple to remove. Just right-click, remove. Now for a variable value, as we saw here with the weight, you can right-click the paragraph, add text, and just below text value you'll see variable value. And select that, and in the variable drop-down menu you can select the variable that you would like to place. And there it is. We placed our weight again. And of course, in between that we have a line break. Line breaks can be very useful. There are several ways of adding space in the document template. One of them, of course, is through a line break, as we've seen here. Another method is simply to use a blank row, and as we will see here, we use blank rows a few times in this project, and blank rows are just another way of adding space between elements. You can also use margins and padding, and if we right-click a cell, we can see that the cells have padding, and automatic, the default is there is no padding defined, but you can very easily change this and specify padding. Padding is particularly good with inner elements such as text. If text needs space between the parent element itself padding, using some padding is advised generally. It defines space between the border and the element content. Margins define space between a border and other outer elements. So a good example of this in this very project is if we look up at our document template and right click and select Edit and Margins, we will see that we have some margins already set on this document template. What if I were to change it? Well, let's say I make it a little bit smaller. We'll go 10 and to the left, and we'll say, let's make a top value of 20. Notice that the entire form is shifted over left, shifted up a little bit upward. And again, that's just margins for the entire document template. So you can change those around rather easily, and there are margins, again, recommended on whenever there's a border and an outer element. It's recommended that you specify the margins unless the automatic margins look fine. But if something doesn't look good or it doesn't look right, always check the margins and or the padding of the respective component, because that's usually the culprit. Alright, so continuing on down, we've seen that we can add text and variables, and that's more or less what is going on here throughout the entire project. Just components and elements. We're adding components like cells, paragraphs, rows, tables, and to the paragraph element, more often than not, we're simply adding elements like text and variables that we've created, and of course some padding and margins thrown in for spacing. And again, you can adjust the font in any way, shape, or form that you see fit. And again, you can follow along with the descriptions to identify where exactly this information is, and it's very, very easily defined. Now, the interesting part about this particular project, and there are really two in terms of the document template, one of those areas is, of course, the detail lines. And we've used the very descriptive heading of item things to describe the detail lines. And if we look at this row here, we can see that it's got something interesting about it that the other rows don't have, and that's a repeat of variable. So what's going on here is that for every instance of the variable part, which is placed under item here, every instance of that variable, the item will repeat. So if I just did a no repeat, then you would have to place each item individually, and you wouldn't be able to stop that particular item from repeating or control it in any way. But with the repeat of variable, what you're doing is you're allowing these details every time a part is placed, the part is placed as well as everything that you put in this particular row. And of course we put the variable part, we put the variable description beneath it, and then of course we also put the quantity and the price. So every time it sees the variable part, it places the variable part along with description, quantity, and price. And this is where, again, the power of the document template comes into play, that repeatability with built-in pagination. Finally, in the interesting document template facts, we have ourselves a box. Boxes are interesting for a couple of reasons, but mainly because they are static, paginated placement of information. So while you saw the variability of these detail lines, they're repeating based on certain criteria, we see that a box is a really good way to place an element and keep it there no matter what. So if we look at the box here, we've used absolute positioning and defined a place on the form where we want it to go. And it's really simple. And the box is right here. This is everything our box contains: the thank you for choosing header, the eFORMz logo, and a QR barcode along with some text. And a box is much like a table element in terms of adding things to it, adding document components to it. You can simply right click it, add component, and you can really add any of these components to it. And we started off with the thank you for choosing. That's just some static text. But there are two interesting elements here. One of them is the image. How did we get an eFORMz logo here? Well, we right-clicked the paragraph and selected Add Image, and we selected the Image from Project option. And if we can select the drop-down menu, we have an image from project. It's our logo. Select OK, and there it is. We put this grayscale monochrome eFORMz logo into the project itself. And how did we do that? Well, if we go back up all the way to the very top of the project window, we can see the project name, and we can right-click that, select Properties, and select Images. And you see we have this image here. And of course we can edit the scaling if we so see fit, and we have shrunk it to the desired size. But if you wanted to add an image to the project, you could select Add, and you could add any images you wanted from any folder and put them in the project. Now the advantage to this, as opposed to simply adding an image from a file, which we can do in eFORMz, and we can also add images from URLs, and there are various other methods to adding images in eFORMz. The advantage to this method, however, is that once it's added in the project, it's in the project for life, unless you decide to take it out. And I could easily remove it just by clicking Remove. But what's good about this is if you're moving your project around and you're not keeping it on one workstation, but you have it on a server, for example, it's a very good idea to have the image hosted in the project itself, so that the image will always move with the project no matter where it goes. So we have ourselves our images here in our box. And again, you can add images to tables as well. You can add images directly to any kind of document element or document component. We also have ourselves a barcode, and this is a QR barcode or quick response barcode. And that's also something you can just add by right-clicking the paragraph and selecting Add Barcode, 1D or 2D barcode. Click 2D. We have various options, and we added, of course, quick response. And our quick response barcode was just our website, Minisoft.com. And we can click OK, and there it is. Now that we have our barcode created, let's look at a few quick things before we wrap up this video on our packing slip sample project. First, if you wanted to change where the form is without messing with the document template, that is, if you wanted to move all of the data down or move it to the right or left, these offsets here at the bottom can do that. So let's say I wanted to move my data down. I can enter a number and it'll move down. If I wanted to move it up, I could just throw a negative there in front of that, and there it goes. It's moved up. If I want to move it right, I can enter a value and it'll move right. And if I decide I want it to move left, I can add a negative in front of that, and there it goes. So you can control the movement of all of your data, the entire merged form and data, simply by controlling the offsets here at the bottom. Also, we want to quickly take a look, if we scroll up here in our project window, to our form properties, and this is very important. The packing slip form, and you can see the form icon adjacent to it on the left here. If we right-click that and select the General tab, we can see the page size drop-down menu, and we've chosen 4x8 label for this example. That's a very common size for two-sided thermolabel printers. 4x6 label is even more common, and we support a variety of page sizes, label sizes. We can always support custom sizes as well. And we also support A5, which is a very common two-sided label size for duplex laser printers. But it's important to define the correct page size that you'll be sending to the printer, and of course the correct orientation, portrait or landscape, is also important. So let's exit out of that. And finally, this data file, right? You open the project and the data in the form display. Well, what if you wanted to change the data file in your own example? If you were following along, you can simply do that by selecting Open Data from File, and you can open a file. And of course, files of type, I would recommend selecting all files, so all of your files show, and all your files will show here, and you can select whatever data file you would like to continue following along. You can, of course, edit the XML file that we've provided in a text editor, such as Notepad or Notepad++, if you so desire. In our next video, we will be looking at our sample shipping project.